So, Piers, thank you very much for coming along. You are the very first guest that I've had on my podcast.
I feel honoured.
So thanks for coming along. And we've ridden together a few times now, haven't we?
We have, yeah. Mega Avalanche, Finale Liguri, some of the best locations actually.
Yeah. The Mega was just amazing. It was cool to ride the Haibikes there, and then the same in Finale. And we had a few things planned this year. Hopefully we'll get to do them soon, when all this crazy stuff is over. But for a lot of people will not know who you are. So give us a brief introduction to you and who you work for, and maybe some of your history and that kind of stuff.
So I'm a designer. I'm an industrial designer by training. Although I've never really worked in industrial design. I graduated at the height of the dot-com boom and got a job in web design because I spent about a week after I graduated making a website and just figuring out how to make a basic index page, and wanted to put all my products online to try to get a job as an industrial designer. And of course it was a dot-com boom, so everybody just was looking for web designers, and I got a job straight away as a web designer, which kind of was my start into design. Started working in London in a big interactive agency, and it was really exciting work. It was an exciting time to be working in that industry, but I was always into bikes. I had a passion for bikes since I was a little kid. Got my first motorcycle when I was 4 years old, which was a bit crazy of my parents thinking about it, especially because I drove it straight into the side of a house. First time on it. But
hold on, what, a motorbike?
Yeah, I got a motorbike for my 4th birthday. It's kind of a funny story because we went and watched a race near our house, and when I was 3.5, I think, or no, it was maybe like a month before my 4th birthday, and I was just completely obsessed with motorbikes from that moment. And I said to my parents, I was like, it's my birthday coming up. I want a motorbike. And my mum said, okay, look, if you can't even ride a bicycle right now. You're 3 years old. You can't ride a bicycle. If you can learn to ride a bicycle before your 4th birthday, then you can have a motorbike. And of course, I went out that day, took the stabilizers off on my little bicycle, and learned how to ride a bicycle that day. And I came back and I was like, right, you got to buy me a motorbike now. And my mum was like, oh my God, what have we done? And she said, no, of course we're not going to buy you a motorbike. It was just, I didn't really mean it. And of course, that didn't go down very well with me. So I said, oh, you're a liar, you promised. And anyway, long story short, I came down on my 4th birthday, and there was a tiny little 50cc motorbike in the kitchen. And that started a lifelong passion for 2 wheels, I guess. So yeah, just to loop back to what I was saying before. So working in London was exciting work, but I really always wanted to work in the bike industry. So I started looking at all the brands which I was into as a kid. I raced motocross for some years when I was younger, and so I looked at all the brands that I had products from, like Fox, Alpinestars, Scott, just all of these brands, and I found the Alpinestars website in Italy, which was absolutely like terrible website. It was just like underlined hyperlinks on a page. And at the time we were making like really pretty badass flash, fully interactive websites with CGI integrated and keyframes. And I sent them an email. I said, hey, I've been a fan of your brand since I was a kid, and I'm working in London, and do you have any jobs available? And they basically invited me out for an interview. I flew out to Italy. The CEO, Gabriele Mazzarolo, he sat me in front of a computer and he said, right, you show me something now. And I was like, oh my God. So I had to download the software, and I made a little microsite to show him what I could do. And yeah, anyway, 10 o'clock that evening, I signed a contract with them, and moved to Italy about 2 months later. And as a web designer for Alpinestars, which was absolutely brilliant time. Great group of people, lots of riding, loads of motocross tracks near us, and yeah, we rode moto almost year round every weekend, and yeah, great time.
Alpinestars, I loved their gear, having gone through a phase of owning motorbikes for, well, most of my life. Alpinestars stuff, the design of, you know, the materials and the branding was really strong. So you were involved with, I guess, some of the branding as well, or was your role to go in and fix the website?
I mean, funnily enough, I applied as an industrial designer at Alpinestars, and he liked my interactive work, so that's why I ended up doing web design. But he let me work on some product stuff. I did some jackets, did a bunch of t-shirts, did a lot of their advertising, actually almost all their advertising for 3 years, and was hand coding the websites back then, manually uploading everything via FTP. It was no kind of content management system or anything back then, but yeah, it was an exciting time. The brand was booming, motorsports were booming. They were super active. They were just getting into Formula One racing. They were getting into road racing more seriously. They were completely dominant in Supercross with Jeremy McGrath, and the company was doing super well. And yeah, still one of my favorite places I've ever worked. So big up to Gabriele Mazzarola.
Why did you leave those guys?
Yeah, Italy's still my favorite country in the world. I love the people, I love the culture, I love the food, great weather. But I was living in the middle of nowhere. Like Alpinestars in Asolo, which is this tiny little medieval town on a hill. And I just felt like I wasn't getting any further. So I wanted to move to California. It was always a dream to be in California. And I applied to Fox Racing. And to my massive surprise, they actually sent me an email straight away back and said, hey, we love the Alpinestars website. We're looking for an interactive director. Can you come for an interview in California? And my brother was doing season in Whistler at the time. So I was planning to fly over there to go snowboarding with him. So I stopped off at California on the way, met my mom who lives out there, and went for an interview. And they basically offered me the job at the interview. So yeah, worked at Fox, which was a massive wake-up call, I would say, going from I don't want to call it a small company in Italy, but like, how do I put it? They just did things differently. It was one guy was basically the leader of everything, and it was a very top-down company. And in Fox Racing, it was a very well-developed company. They'd been in business for a long time. They had many different layers of management. They were very structured. They did things incredibly professionally in a way that I had just not seen before. Like, you know, just to give an example, they would have we would have a sales meeting or a web meeting on Monday morning, and there would be 12 people around the table involved in the head of sales, head of marketing, designers, coders, people from fulfillment, project managers. It was just a massive company, very corporate, which from the outside, it's always I always thought it was a really cool company, and it is a very cool company, but it's also a very corporate company, at least compared to Alpinestars.
So there must be a technique for sending these companies emails and getting seen straight away, or was it just luck? Because for you to, you know, send these guys an email, Alpinestars, and go and see them, and then being really impressed and offering you a job, and then to Fox. What is there a technique, or was it like timing, or were you just so good that they were like, we need this guy?
I'd like to think so. Yeah, I mean, I think I was just the right guy at the right place at the right time, especially at that time, because okay, I came from a web design company, and the people who were working in the motorsport brands were not necessarily like web design professionals. and I came from an agency into this environment. So I brought in, I guess, a level of professionalism into the web design that wasn't perhaps there before.
Cool. So you went from, where did you go after Fox?
After Fox, I went to back to the UK. No, I actually went to Barcelona because of a girlfriend who persuaded me to move to Barcelona with her, which is absolutely beautiful city, but it was quite a difficult place to work. So was there for about 6 months, then moved back to the UK, and then just out of the blue, I got a job offer to go to a traditional ad agency called Leo Burnett in Frankfurt. And at the time I thought, I don't know, do I really want to live in Frankfurt? I didn't even know where it was. I had to look it up on a map. I mean, obviously I knew it was in Germany, but I didn't know exactly where it was. I didn't know if it was near the mountains. I was a huge fan of the mountains, skiing, snowboarding, biking in the mountains. And it's kind of right in the middle of Germany, right in the middle of Europe. But the job sounded fascinating. It was making a website for Marlboro Racing, which was Ferrari in Formula One and Ducati in MotoGP, and really super nice people there. And I thought actually it's a good chance to learn from like big ad agency how they do things, because they are definitely experts in that field. And it's so different when you work in an ad agency as opposed to being like doing ads as an internal designer in a brand company. I wanted to see how they did it, and went to Frankfurt, and it was brilliant, like super nice people, work was good, really cool agency. And the work was really exciting. So I was there for 3.5 years. But then the Marlboro Racing project faded out, and we had to work on some other stuff, and was kind of starting to get a little bit boring, the work. The final straw for me, I had to do a campaign for a yogurt drink moisturizer, and they wanted the campaign to be a woman holding a yogurt drink next to her face like this, and it was all like pastel colors, and I was like, okay, I'm out. This is not for me. So I was a huge fan of KTM for a long time. When I lived in Italy, I was riding KTM 125, SX 125 motocross bike, and just loved the bike. I was a huge fan of what they were doing, because it was somehow different than the Japanese brands, especially their design. And I found out that the design was done from this tiny little agency just outside Salzburg in Austria. So I sent them an email, and they invited me for an interview straight away. So drove down, met them. Super nice guys, like great company, really, really exciting projects, from industrial design to communication, branding, mainly for KTM. They had some other clients, but it was mainly KTM focused. And I just thought this is brilliant. Salzburg, right in the mountains, beautiful, beautiful town. Thought this is great. I can go skiing all the time again, and work on great projects. So persuaded my girlfriend at the time, Yuli, to come and live with me. She said, okay, I'll go there, but only on the condition that it's only for 2 years, and you have to promise me that after that we can move back to Hamburg, because that's where she's from. And 7.5 years later, we were still there, having had 2 children, got married, bought a house, and time kind of flew.
Yeah, that's I think a lot of people have that time in their life when just family and things seem to happen so quick. I've actually got your portfolio here that you sent me, and it looks super cool. So
thank you.
I'm just going to have a look at some of these bits that you've kind of gone through some of this stuff here, and starting working with, I guess that was the agency that were doing the KTM stuff, was it? Or was that? Yeah,
this was all Kiska stuff. So it used to be, I mean, if you go up a little bit, so the slide before, so this was Stefan Pira, the CEO or owner of KTM. He bought Husqvarna and had this kind of platform sharing concept idea, like the same way car companies do, how they share the same chassis and they do a different bodywork on top. So he wanted to do the same with Husqvarna because they had a big dealer network. Wanted to basically come come up with a different approach to KTM, but using the same platform. So we did this big brand differentiation project, coming up with keywords which would define KTM, other ones would define Husqvarna, and seeing how we could then apply that to everything from color, trim and graphics through to typography, to the treatment of the different components, the paints, the communication language, advertising. And so this was really about like separating two brands, creating totally different worlds. And this then was kind of a roadmap for how to approach product development and advertising and all the communication for both brands. It was kind of the start of the new Husqvarna.
So part of your role was to put in some brand differentiation between the two products or the two brands.
Exactly. Like people need to know what they're going to get if they buy a Husqvarna, or they need to know what they get when they buy a KTM. And this was right at the very beginning. And I think they're still following this roadmap quite clearly. You see the huge difference between like a Husqvarna 301, for example, versus like a KTM Duke. Same chassis, just different bodywork. And
I got to say, those KTMs, they still look stunning. The RC8 was such an iconic bike, and you did the design for all the decals on that one as well.
So yeah, I mean, they have really, really talented industrial designers at Kiska, and there was actually an Austrian guy who did that RC8, and this was, I think, the second generation, and we just come up with a new color split, trying to make it a bit bolder, make it look a bit sportier, a bit more racy. This was one below, that's a KTM 690 Duke. This was an aftermarket graphics kit I did, just pure graphic project.
You can start to see where some of the design for the Haibikes are kind of heavily influenced from some of this styling, the lines and the design choices and the block design. And I can see where the new designs for the Haibikes have been influenced from some of your past work.
Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, it should be like, yeah, it was interesting. When I saw Haibike, actually, I thought, you know what, they definitely, I don't know if they were taking design cues from KTM or whether it was just, you know, it's existing in a similar space, similar target demographic. I think the demographics changed a little bit in the few years, but at the beginning, they were definitely trying to get people's attention. So the bikes were very, very loud, almost obnoxiously so, I would say. But, you know, this was part of the brand values. And this is why it's always so important to get, like, you know, what the brand stands for right, because that then influences your decision. So I might personally really like super reduced, clear, empty bikes. I don't really need to have lots of graphics on my bikes myself, but this is about following like a brand's DNA and extrapolating that into the design. So Haibike is always super bold, super aggressive, combative, loud, extreme. And this then influences the graphics more than my taste. KTM's is very similar in terms of their positioning. They're also very loud. They're fiery. They're extreme. They're aggressive. It's quite similar brand values. I think that Husqvarna on the other side, they're cool, light, minimal, reduced, Swedish. You know, they're taking a very different approach, and this is my taste personally is more in that direction. But as a designer, I know how to interpret a brief and try to bring that into the product alive. That was the start of Husqvarna. That was the first year. Was actually probably a little bit too KTM-y. After this, we then did the brand positioning, the split. So this was then one of the first ones after that. So you can see, for example, the curves are much smoother, softer, whereas KTM was very sharp edge, very hard. So the MotoGP bike, this stronger color blocking, cleaner lines, more lighter feel, lighter colors.
So you work for some really cool brands, Alpinestars, Fox Racing, with the agency Kiska, and working, you know, on projects like KTM, Husqvarna. Where did Haibike come along in all of this, and how did you find them? Why did you leave what you were doing to work with Haibike?
So after 7 years at Kiska, I was ready for a change. I was actually ready for a change after 5 years, but with family and kids and stuff, I was kind of a bit stuck in my ways, and I couldn't really get any higher within that company. It was just kind of like I was head of color trim and graphics for the brands, and I needed a change. So after 7 years, I then went freelance. I was working for BMW motorcycles, doing graphics for them. And there was a guy called Alex Tuspas who I worked with right at the start of Kiska on an AKG pitch project, headphone project. I was doing 3D renders for him with his designs, and we got on super well. Did some good work together. And he then asked my current business partner at Haibike Design Centre if he knew anybody who could do graphics. A guy called Benna is my partner, and he was working at Adidas at the time. And Benna told Alex about me, and Alex remembered me from when we worked on this project together. So Alex then reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I need some help working for Haibike." And I was like, "Well, what's Haibike?" I didn't really know anything about it. He said, "Yeah, we make these e-bikes." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And at the time I was riding loads of motocross and enduro motorcycling, doing a bit of mountain biking. But I always, even when I was really fit, I always hated pedaling up hills. I mean, it's just, hated is a bit of a strong word. I just never enjoyed it. Like, it was always kind of like the rubbish part of the bike ride. I know some people like it, but personally it just wasn't for me. Anyway, Alex said, "Yeah, so we're making these e-bikes and they basically give you power going uphill." And I was like, "That sounds brilliant." Like, okay, I was like, I want to come and meet you, and we can discuss the project, but let's meet on some bikes because I want to try one of these bikes. So anyway, his parents had a bike shop in a little town outside of Munich, and met at the bike shop, went for a ride, and I just thought these things are absolutely brilliant. And this was in 2015, start of 2015. And so anyway, kept talking during the year, and we started discussing potentially opening a design studio, because he was basically a one-man army for Haibike. He was doing the industrial design, the color trim and graphics, the advertising, the strategy, the branding, I mean, helping the sales. He was absolutely burning at 500%. And he needed some help. So he needed help with the industrial design, needed help with the color trim and graphics, needed some help with the communication stuff. So together with Benna, who was at Adidas, he's an industrial designer by trade and by training, and he was designing football boots in the Adidas advanced development team. Designed Ozil's football boots, did some really innovative, like sockless, laceless, I should say, football boots. Anyway, he was also kind of really into bikes. He was my old biking buddy from when I was at Kiska. He was also at Kiska with me. And we all met and started talking about potentially opening a studio in Munich. And I was continuing to work freelance for BMW during this year and some other clients. Bonelli in Italy, another motorcycle brand. And yeah, eventually we got on super well. We said, okay, let's do it. So we put a plan in place, was presented to the board of, I think, the Excel group by the current CEO, Susie, and her husband. And yeah, that was the start of the Haibike Design Centre. We got a contract for 5 years to basically take care of all the innovation, color trim and graphics, brand marketing, communication for Haibike.
So going from a one-man band to a team, and you pretty much have taken on all of their marketing as well. So it's not just the branding and the design and the color and the graphics, but all of the marketing and everything for all of the Haibike. So you don't work for Haibike. You are a separate company that work exclusively with Haibike. Is that correct? Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And where would you say like the e-bike scene was in 2015? I mean, you said that you'd not even really heard too much about them, or
I didn't know much about them at all. No, I mean, I was so impressed. Haibike had a model called Enduro, which they still have. It's 180 millimeters of travel. Had like the first Bosch motor in it. I think it was the first really capable e-mountain bike. I mean, they had some before that were good, but that one, I could take it up to the top of Geisberg, the mountain above Salzburg, and I could smash it down the trails faster than I could I had a Specialized stump jumper, carbon FSR at the time, which I got from Enduro magazine as a long-term test bike through my website, Derestricted, because at the time I had 400,000 followers on Facebook, and it was kind of, it was going pretty good. So anyway, I used to get a lot of free product to test, a bit like you. And I just couldn't believe how good this thing was. Like, I don't know if it was the weight or it was just the kinematics were good. Like, everything was so dialed on that. I mean, there were some things that I wasn't a big fan of. I got a lot of pedal strikes. The geometry felt a bit short, a little bit too steep in for a 180 mil travel bike. But all in all, it was a really good bike. And I thought I want to be part of this. And the funny thing is, like, pretty soon after that, I got rid of my motocross bikes and my enduro motorcycles, and that was it. And got rid of my mountain bikes, and e-bikes took over completely and became my go-to hobby. I guess took over my passion for motorcycles.
I think that's the case for a lot of people right now. I think that the risk and the cost with motorcycling or off-road motorbiking it's kind of getting more difficult, isn't it? It's getting more difficult to ride a bike safely and fast, and certainly off-road. I think that there's access issues, and
it was the hassle as well. I mean, we were lucky where I lived in Salzburg. I had a friend who has a really excellent motocross track called X-Bowl Arena, 20 minutes from Salzburg. But even being 20 minutes from Salzburg, I'd have to get my bike out, load it on the trailer, get all my gear out, hook the trailer up to the car, drive to the track, unload everything, get dressed again, ride around, then load it up again, get back home, unload it again, wash it. Anyway, just so much faffing around. And as much as I loved it, once I got an e-bike, I just put my gear on at my house, roll out of my shed, and could ride for, 2 hours and come back in the time that it would take me before I would do a lap on the motocross track. And I'd be riding better trails some of the time, nicer scenery. It was quiet, peaceful, still loads of adrenaline. You can go fast. A lot of it felt like a lot of people say e-bikes are heavy, but coming from a motocross bike, that was never an issue for me. They always felt light. And the weight, the stability was actually a benefit over the traditional mountain bike, I found quite early on. So, just fell in love with the sport.
So you were a proper early adopter. I bet when you told people you were riding e-bikes, they were like, I bet you had to put up with some abuse over the years, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, especially, so I have this website, derestricted.com, which I set up in 1998 or something like that, a bloody long time ago, as my portfolio website. And at the time I was looking for a name, and I moved to London and I bought a scooter, a little 50c scooter, which is the only thing I could afford at the time. Went out at the dealership and I was like, meh. I was like, what the hell is wrong with this thing? It's so slow. I went and did one lap around the block, came back. I was like, hey, guys, this bike's ridiculous. I cannot ride this bike. It's too slow. I was like, what can I do to make it faster? And they're like, well, you can de-restrict it, mate. You can just take the pipe off. There's a little ring in the pipe, or put a tuned pipe on it, and you can de-restrict it. And I was like, all right, just do it. And please do it. I was young at the time. I was 22, I guess. Didn't really care what was legal, what wasn't legal. It's not legal actually to do de-restricting. And but anyway, they did it, and the bike was amazing. It was just like wah, 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 like fully tuned scooter suddenly. So at the time I was looking for a website and looked for de-restricted. De-restricted was available. Registered the URL, and that was my website. And so of course, once I got into e-bikes, people were like, "Wow, are you de-restricting your e-bike?" And as a responsible business owner co-owner of Haibike Design Centre, I do not de-restrict my e-bikes because it's illegal. It invalidates your warranty. It's one of those weird things which I've kind of learned living in Germany a long time. They have a sense of like doing the right thing for the whole, as opposed to you as an individual. Like if I de-restrict my bike, is it going to be more fun to ride? Yes, like for sure. But if I hit somebody on a trail, I can get e-bikes banned from all the trails near me. It's just, I'm putting my personal pleasure over the greater well-being of not just like people in my area who are into e-bikes, but the sport and the industry as a whole. Because if people start having head-on collisions at 60 kilometers an hour on the trails on e-bikes, they'll be banned. And currently they're still certified as bicycles. So it's a difficult one because I started off as de-restricting my motorcycle back in London because it seemed like the only way that I could actually get from A to B in safety, because going slow is also not good when you're in traffic. But now, I don't de-restrict my bikes, but it's definitely been a conflict with my de-restricted website. So
I can imagine. I was going to ask you that actually. A couple of things. I think that's a real selfless sense to have, for the greater good, I guess. You don't tune it because even though you said it'd be maybe more exciting to ride, you want to protect access for everybody. And I think the thing with de-restricting bikes or tuning them is everyone would love these bikes to go 20, 25 or 30. No one designs them to stop at 15.5 miles an hour or 25 kilometers, but that's the law, isn't it? And we all need to, I think, adhere to that for the great of e-mountain biking. Otherwise, all it takes is a few high profile cases and someone to say, look, screw it. They're going to be banned, or you're going to need to have a different classification for them.
I mean, there's another side of it as well, which is that if you have spent a lot of money on an e-bike, and e-bikes, let's make no mistake about it, they are expensive, and then you de-restrict it, you're invalidating your warranty. So this is also something which I don't think is responsible to promote as somebody associated with Haibike. Like, I don't want anybody on their Haibike to de-restrict their motor and then find it blows up and then they don't get the motor under warranty. So and of course it's because it's illegal, you actually lose your driving license in Germany if you get busted. It's the equivalent to driving a motorcycle without any insurance. So
that's pretty big.
On my local trails, most of the time 25 is fine anyway. I mean, that's only for uphill, and the rest of the time you can anyway pedal over the limit if you want.
Fair. So working at Haibike must be pretty cool. I mean, it's grown massively in those 5 years, and Haibike, I think you'll probably be able to give me some of the history, but made the first e-mountain bike, maybe? Is that correct?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people know this, but definitely Haibike was, I think you could thank Haibike for commercializing e-mountain bikes in a way that nobody else did. Like some other, like Cube did it pretty good afterwards. Specialized came a bit later, but Haibike made the first ever e-mountain bike, the first E29er, the first carbon e-mountain bike, the first fat e-bike, the first downhill e-bike, the first S-pedelec e-bike, the first like mass market models. And this was their roadmap. They basically more or less copied the categories from the traditional bike industry and made the e-bike version. And they did it first. And this was one of the reasons why they were so successful, because they did it first. They did it pretty well. They just completely dominated the market. There was very little alternative. This is, I think, the first one that I rode. And yeah, this was a great bike. It's pretty light. I mean, it's funny because the weight of these e-bikes has gone up, and Haibike made back in, I think, pretty soon after this, like 2016, I think, they made it's called a full 7 model, which weighed, I think, 18 kilograms. There's a Bosch motor, full carbon, 120 or 140 travel. And yeah, it was 18 kilograms, But what happened is that people want to have, like, you have to ask people what they want to have. And a lot of people, they want to have lighter bikes, but they also want to have reliable bikes. They also want to have comfortable bikes. And it's always like a balancing act. So, and they also want to have affordable bikes. So this 18 kilogram full carbon Haibike was really expensive. I think it was 12,000 euros. I think they went up to, they made one model like 24,000 euros or something ridiculous. And they actually sold out, like they completely sold out of these bikes. So yeah, there was a market for these lightweight, expensive bikes, but that's not really where the volume is. So Haibike is definitely a volume-focused brand.
Yeah, we're seeing more recently lightweight bikes becoming more of a thing. But going back a little bit, that 2014 bike that we just looked at, and then the change over those 5 years has been crazy, hasn't it? You know, the motor technology, the battery, the integration, the power.
Integration is a difficult one because there's not many advantages to integration. If you really look at it, I remember the first time that I rode that bike that you just showed me, the first thing I said when I saw it was like, why don't you like integrate the battery? Like actually like Specialized did at the time. And the guy who's the designer of the bike, he said, well, it's simple. It's just, there's no advantages in doing it because as soon as you integrate the battery, you have to scale up all the tubing. So you have to make everything bigger, all the proportions bigger in order to integrate the battery. You can't just have a fat down tube and then a skinny top tube and everything else. You have to scale up everything in order to make the bike look balanced. And of course, as soon as you do that, you add weight. It gets heavier and heavier. You end up with heat dissipation issues. It's much, much more expensive. It's more complicated. You end up with just many new problems you have to solve. And you don't really gain anything other than optics. It just looks neater. But this is the way that the market's gone because this is what people want. So people have said, okay, we want to have integrated bikes. We also want to have lighter bikes. But it's quite difficult to do both unless you end up with a very, very expensive bike.
Yeah, well, I think that pretty much everyone now has gone to fully integrated, really, or there might be some smaller brands that are not yet, but I think all the brands now, Shimano, Bosch, Yamaha, they make their own internal batteries, right? So it just kind of makes sense. But I get what you're saying. You know, a lot of the bikes that I've ridden with the external batteries, the Vita C Summit is one where the battery's so low, and it's on the tube, but it means the center of gravity is quite low, and the new Lapierre GLP2 uses that same kind of thought process. The battery.
This is brilliant. I love it. This is a mountain bike. It's not trying to pretend to be a bicycle. It's like it's trying to make the optimized layout package for creating the best handling product, as opposed to just simply trying to make an mountain bike look like a bicycle, which is what a lot of brands do, you know. And I think that because people are used to it, like it's easy to sell a bike that looks like an e-bike that looks like a bike because it's not shocking in any way. People look at this as very polarizing, but does it handle better than most bikes with a normal integrated battery? I don't know, maybe you can answer that question.
It's so noticeably different. The distribution, it's so focused in the center of the bike. Even just by picking the bike up and moving it around, you can feel how little weight there is on the front. Because the battery doesn't slide all the way up the down tube, it's a massively noticeable.
You know, the main development criteria, one of the main development goals of all motorcycle brands when they're making a motocross bike is mass centralization, because you want to have all the mass centered around the pivot point of the bike. And I guess in this case, it's kind of the crank. So the more you can put the mass around here, the better the balance of the bike is. So I haven't ridden this one yet. I rode the old one, which I liked a lot, and I cannot wait to get hold of one of these things. I'm definitely gonna try to spend some time on it, because I think it's a brilliant looking bike, and yeah, it's light, it's powerful, and well balanced.
I mean, Nico Vulio was given pretty much free rein to design the best enduro electric mountain bike, and that's, you know, that's what he believes is the pinnacle in the weight distribution. A lot of people might not know that Lapierre are part of Accel, because Accel is quite a big group, right? What other brands are in it?
Ghost, Winora, Kuga, Bratavis, Sparta, Rally in the UK. I mean, we at Haibike Design Centre, we concentrate on Haibike, and also now we're doing quite a lot of industrial design for Winora as well, which is a more urban focused brand, I would say. Not quite so sporty like Haibike, but like, you know, over half the planet now live in the cities, so there's a huge demographic who are after, you know, solutions for their commuting and transportation in the city, and Winora is quite well positioned for that, I think, as a brand.
Yeah, I think it's not something so much over in the UK, but having been and travelled to quite a few European cities, it's evident that it's massive, you know, trekking, touring, cargo. I don't know if they do those kind of...
They have good infrastructure here. I mean,
yeah,
there's just cycle paths everywhere. Like especially in Munich where I live, there's just, it's probably the best way to get around town. I mean, you never run into traffic. Actually, with coronavirus, there's a lot of bicycle traffic out on the trails at the moment. But yeah, it's such a good way to get around. A lot of people are riding full suspension e-bikes around town for commuting. I spoke to the guy at the big Haibike dealership in Munich, and he told me that more than half the people who bought the FLYON Enduro model were using it to commute on, because it has integrated tail lights, got a big screen. It's really comfortable, really powerful. So it's like a really good bike for commuting in comfort. I mean, of course they get it. They put mud guards on it. They put a stand on it. They do the things which is painful for me to look at as a fan of kind of like real performance focused bikes. But performance can be interpreted in different ways. That's what I wanted to say. So basically, yeah, performance for a commuter means comfort and practicality. You know, this is totally different than performance for just somebody who's going to go shred on the trails. But it's equally as valid, you know, and it needs a different solution a lot of the time.
So talking about the FLYON, a bike that I saw in, I think it was 2018 maybe, they treated that like it felt to me like a tech launch, and it was loaded with technology. And at that point I thought, wow, these e-bikes, they've come such a long way. If you think of only 2014, the bike that we just saw with the, you know, 26-inch wheels, battery mounted on the down tube, and then the FLYON, night and day difference. How did you approach, because I know you were involved in a lot of the design for the FLYON in terms of the branding and some of the industrial design. How did you approach that kind of bike, and talk me through like the initial stages of coming up with the proposition for what that bike actually was?
So Haibike was never trying to make bicycles. Like, they never wanted to make an e-bike like a bicycle. Haibike was always trying to make e-bikes. So Haibike is unapologetically e-bike brand. Other brands, they try to make e-bikes like bicycles. And this is like, I like riding bikes like that too, but I also think that there's a lot of room for creating like a unique archetype, or just really pushing what an e-bike can mean in terms of integration and design and the whole user case around it. And this was really what Haibike was trying to do. They're trying to put Haibike at the heart of the product. So they wanted, it says Haibike when you turn it on. It doesn't say Bosch, doesn't say Yamaha, doesn't say Shimano. It says Haibike when you turn it on. So it was really about making a Haibike, like a true Haibike through and through, as opposed to just getting a frame, whacking in a e-bike system from another brand, and selling it as a mass market. It's a kind of niche product. It's super polarizing. It's in some scenarios it's absolutely unbeatable when you're riding it. Like there's absolutely nothing that can keep up with that thing uphill on any trail. There's still climbs around here that I've been trying to make for the last like forever on other bikes, and I just can only ever make it on the FLYON bike. It has some downsides to that, or compromises. Like an e-bike is always a compromise. You kind of need to decide on what you want it to be and what you want it to do. And in order to achieve that, you have to compromise some areas. And and some things it's brilliant, other things it's not so brilliant. But for people who are looking for flying uphill as fast as they can, you really can't get better than the FLYON, I think.
I remember riding it at the Mega or at the Alpe d'Huez, and doing the classic, whatever that course is called, the meandering up to the top on those never-ending curves to the top of the hill. And the FLYON, we had 2 Levos and the FLYON, and it's in the video actually that I did. The FLYON just is insanely fast, like 25 miles an hour up super steep hills in the Alpe d'Huez, and it probably would have gone faster than that. And the Levos were probably maxing out at 10, 12, 15 miles an hour, and the difference is insane.
To demonstrate quite how ridiculously powerful this bike is, how head and shoulders it is against the other ones. Here you can see a slide. So on the far right is FLYON, and on the left are basically all the systems. Broza's not on there because Broza is tunable, but it maxes out at 19 Newton meters, so it's still a similar top level, but you can't really say, okay, Broza has eco this, trail this, because you can tune that yourself. But just to give you an example, there's basically 2 modes more on FLYON than any other system out there. So it really is something head and shoulders above the others.
Yeah, that's a really good graphic to demonstrate how powerful it is. And is FLYON going to be something that continues? Obviously, you don't need to share any secrets or anything like that. Or was it a project and it had a small lifespan? Or do you think it's something that will continue way into the future?
It's coming. So FLYON will continue in the collection in the next years for sure.
Okay. So how when a bike is launched, how many months or years before that do you actually see it? So with the FLYON, for example, you must have been working on the industrial design and some of the graphics for it, like way in advance of it release. So help us understand from a design point of view what that kind of looks like, and how long are you working on it before it actually goes live. And
so FLYON was quite a unique project because it was designed from the ground up, like every single part of it, including full digital ecosystem, shifter, remote, lights, frame, everything. So that project took years. It could have done with another year before it was released, I think, as everybody knows. But yeah, definitely that was a very unique project. A normal timeline for developing bikes is about 12 months. So from start till the end, like for the normal bikes, like by normal bike, the mass market bike. So the new Bosch Gen 4 bike, for example, that would take 12 months from start till when it's finished, sometimes even faster. But yeah, if you want to make something really unique, then it takes a lot longer, a lot more money, a lot more resources, and there's a lot more risk as well because you get a few issues with it, and yeah, things can go wrong pretty quickly. So
I think some of the timing was not in Haibike's favour. I think that year they'd moved Eurobike about 6 months earlier than it would have normally been, or 4 months or something. So I think that, people saw it way before it probably Haibike initially anticipated.
Yeah, I would agree. It was also a lot of restructuring going on in the Excel group at that time, which definitely complicated things. But the dust is starting to settle on that stuff now. I think it's now going to be the second year that it's out. And yeah, definitely they've sorted out some of the teething problems, and it should be good going forward.
Nice. So you've got some new bikes that you've been working on, and we've seen them quite recently. I've seen Sam Pilgrim has, you've been riding with Sam Pilgrim, Tom Cardy and Yannick on the new Bosch Generation 4 base bikes.
Yeah, those guys are brilliant. They're so much fun. Honestly, it's just the best thing going on. I'm a kind of photographer too. And I do a lot of the photo shoots for Haibike. Just not all of them, but I do the ones with those guys because I have quite a good relationship with them, and we always have a lot of fun together. And they're not always the easiest people to work with. They have kind of their own agenda a lot of the time, but they're just absolute beasts on the bike. I mean, Sam and Yannick and Tom, the things they can do is just like blows my mind all the time when I see them. And those it was the first time they'd ever ridden the new Bosch Gen 4 bikes in Corsica. First time I rode it as well. And I was a bit nervous before going because, of course, if you've never tested a bike, you don't know. I mean, I rode an early prototype version, but I hadn't ridden the finish thing. And I was so relieved how good that bike was, I have to say. And the guys, they were just so enthusiastic about it, absolutely loved it. And that was a huge relief off my shoulders at the start of the photo shoot. And we had a bunch of different models out there. And that bike's good. I really, really like that bike. Yeah. I mean, there's a model above this, the 3.5. It's got like better wheels, better brakes. It's got MT7 brakes, which are perfect for manis down the hills.
You love a good mani.
I love a good mani, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I've got some stuff that we've spoke about on this bike, which hopefully we'll be able to do soonish. And it can take, the thing with this bike is it's got the 625 battery in it, right? And then you can put on another battery onto it, so you can have insane range.
Yeah, 1,125 watt hours, which is, it's really a lot. I mean, I'm relatively fit, actually fitter than I have been for years, thanks to the lockdown and swifting all the time. But in Corsica, the first day before the guys arrived, I took that bike with the range extender battery and I rode basically all day. And I got back home and I was absolutely exhausted. And the battery, I think, was only half done. So I don't know. I mean, it wasn't the steepest terrain. So if you're in big mountains, you can run it out faster, but that's enough battery to keep you going a long time. I mean, even the 625 that's a good size battery too. And this bike,
100 miles on that.
It's easily turbo.
In turbo, that's a big day.
Yeah, so this bike is a tricky one. A lot of the time, the designer has some influence on the bike, but I would say the bigger idea for the bike has a bigger influence, if that makes sense. So the bigger idea for this bike was that it had to have a second battery in every single frame size. So in order to do that, you need to allow enough space for putting a battery there and a shock with a piggyback mount. So essentially, the battery has been shifted forwards and down. And so you end up with a bit of a space between the motor and the frame, which is actually, people were a bit disturbed about that to start with. But what it means is that the motor can get way more air. So it just cools down much better. It also pushes the center of gravity really low. And this is one of the reasons why this bike is so good to ride, because the center of gravity is super low. The new Bosch is really excellent too. Has that little annoying rattling sound when you're on really super gnarly terrain, but Yeah, that definitely is something which is annoying, but the feeling when you pedal it is brilliant on the Bosch too, the new Bosch.
So we've come such a long way in quite a short period of time in the world of e-bikes. Where do you see the future of e-bikes going?
I think it's so early in this development of e-bikes. I mean, what is it, like 10 years? It's basically 10 years. And yeah, I think you imagine what things will be like in 20, 30 years. I just so excited to be old riding like the sickest bikes ever. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be some like upside for getting older because the bikes are just going to get better and better and better. I think that there's, yeah, it's still early in the development. The battery technology is definitely like holding a lot of stuff back because they are heavy and the market is pushing all the time for bigger and bigger batteries, which they're of course heavier and heavier. Unless you go like the Levo SL way, which is okay if you're super fit and you want to have less power. Also, really interesting segment. I think this light EMTB segment. I've ridden the E-Zesty, but I haven't ridden the Levo SL. But it seems interesting for sure. But it's definitely for fit people. Like that's a different thing. Then you have the people who want to have the power. I kind of like the way it's splitting. I think e-mountain bike does it quite well with the way they explain these new categories, like the light one, kind of the mass market middle section, and then the super power side.
And do you think we'll see these super lightweight bikes appear in the Haibike range at any point in the future?
There's definitely a goal to make lighter bikes on one side, but you have to balance it with this necessity to incorporate bigger and bigger batteries to have your bikes able to withstand more and more weight. The minimum weight is shifting from 120 up to 130, 140, 150. And to make a bike stronger, then of course it requires more material. It requires a different way of engineering it. And this is definitely not making it easy to make lighter bikes. So yeah, I mean, some of the lightest bikes out there, what's the weight limit? 120 kilograms, 110 kilograms? And you get a guy, like an average e-bike rider is still probably not the fittest guy out there at the moment. I think it's changing the market, but there's a lot of people who are not in the best shape running e-bikes because it's kind of like, it's just a way that they can enjoy themselves riding bikes. And so maybe they weigh 80, 90 kilograms. And then the bike is 20 kilograms and you put on some backpack and everything else, you're already at the limit, if not over the limit of weight. So yeah, a lot of manufacturers are trying to make their bikes withstand higher weights. And of course, this then makes the bike itself heavier. So yeah, it's difficult. And most people don't want to pay 10,000 euros for a bike either. So of course, it's pretty easy to make a lightweight bike at 10,000 euros, but it's not easy to make a lightweight bike at 5,000 euros.
Are there any other bike brands or bikes out there that you kind of admire in the market?
Yeah, I mean, the GLP2, I think that's brilliant. I've been a Specialized fanboy for forever, since I was a kid. So I always like their bikes for sure. It's funny, like this new Haibike Bosch Gen 4 bike, it's so weirdly polarizing when you first look at it. But like when you see it in person, the more you look at it, the more you just, like I really have kind of fallen in love with that bike now. After riding it and just spending time with it, like it also looks really different. The way that it's the configuration and the hexagonal subframe and it's really skinny top tubes that feels like super light between your knees. I know it sounds like I'm like bigging up like Haibike a little bit here, maybe being a bit biased, but I genuinely think that's a really super, super nice bike. So
cool, man. Looking forward to testing it. Hopefully soon. Fingers crossed. We're in lockdown at the moment, so maybe we'll just carry on riding a bit more Zwift at the moment.
You got me into Zwift. I would never consider staying in a dark, cold basement, like pedaling on a stationary bike, looking at a computer screen as something. I would never have thought I'd be doing that, honestly. But it's like you say, it's completely addictive. It's so structured. Like you can, you set a target and then every single day or every second day, you know exactly what you have to do. And the way that they can manipulate your heart rate so precisely with their training is just amazing. And you can feel and see the results like really, really, yeah, powerfully. And I think even more so than just going out riding normally. I mean, all I've done for fitness most of my life is just riding bikes. And now I'm actually doing some structured training thanks to Swift, and I can really feel and see the improvements. So I need to thank you for that, by the way, because you got me into Swift. I would be really bored with this whole lockdown thing if it hadn't been for that, because it's just kept me kind of motivated throughout it all. So
no worries. Just promise me you're not going to go full roadie.
I actually bought some Lycra shorts. First time in my life. I normally they come with a lot of shorts when you get them from manufacturers. I always take them out and throw them away. And now I've actually got some proper Lycra cycling shorts with the shoulder straps and everything. So yeah.
No way, man. That is taking it too far. All right, man. Thanks for coming on. It's been great to chat, and hopefully we'll get to ride soon. So cheers. All the best.
I hope so. Definitely. Thank you very much for inviting me. All right. Cheers, Rob.